Hello magical folk, welcome to Starting Out Solitary. It's sub-week and it's fairy, and the topic this week is a big one, and it is about making magic during emotional crisis. So I just want to make a note before we begin that if you have found this video in some way because you yourself are in emotional crisis, I do want to urge you to seek some support in whatever format that looks like for you, because the advice and spell working that I do today is, well, I'm not a doctor, basically, I'm a witch, and I'm also on YouTube, and sometimes if you're in crisis, it's really good to connect with people that you trust and something that you trust. So make sure you've got your allies in place. So, the topic, magic during emotional crisis. So if I had to wait to do magic when everything was perfect and all my ducks were in a row and I was in perfect alignment and my chakras were gleamy and vibrant, I would never make magic because I am a mess. And that is like, geez man, I've been anxious since I was in utero, I'm pretty sure, and oh, man, the emotions are very big. And I think it's because I have that HSP personality, the highly sensitive personality, or call it empath, call it Piscean, Sun, Cancerian, Moon, call it whatever you like, but I feel like I have been crying and anxious my whole life. But I don't think that that is a bad thing. What I've come to realise is that the way I was brought up, the school that I went to, and the authority figures in my life, number one, I gave them all the power, which they happily took. And number two, I was taught that if you don't emote a certain way, act a certain way, look a certain way, then you are wrong. And what that did was undermine my emotional intelligence and squash me down flat. And what the job has been through my art witchery and magical practice has been to reconnect in with the strong, powerful self who also cries, who is also emotional, who has anxiety and fears and issues just like everybody else, and learn not to squash them, but rather to listen to them. So I have actually thought in the past, well, I should not be making magic if I'm in crisis. And maybe crisis is different to just feeling emotions. I would pretty much say that if you can't ground, if you are frantic, well, if I was in those spaces, there's no way that I would even be thinking about trying to work magic anyway, because I would be incapacitated by the panic attack of the moment. So perhaps we can think of crisis as a spectrum, emotional crisis as a spectrum. And if there's something that you're working through emotionally, then I think that your magic, the magic is the art of changing your consciousness at will. That's using the craft of your magic. Like, that's potent energy in that idea of crisis. And so that potent energy would surely make potent magic. So I am working with tapping into anger as a means to reclaim power at the moment, and I'm going to take us through a art witchery practice that you might like to try yourself in, rather than, and this doesn't mean you might not have anger to be processing, it might be any other form that your emotional body needs to express itself. And what the prompt is to lean in and ask your emotions and listen and feel and tune into what do they need from you. So for this exercise, what happens is, I've found, is that when we lean in and let our emotions lead us, when we listen to them, they have the space to express themselves. It does bring up fear. It does, but then it also shows you your obstacles, and then it shows you the way through them. Whenever we squash things and repress them, they just become like a festery boil, like they just, like it needs to flow, the energy needs to flow. And even if it's emotions that are, we think of as not good, there's no such thing in the land of emotions. Emotions are emotions. There's joy and there's freaking out and some certainly don't feel very nice. But if I have personally found, and this is just my own life experience, that if I am not willing to create a safe space through my magical practice and lean into these things, then they are going to rip my life apart. And then there will be much more crisis than I'm currently in trying to deal with said emotion. Let's embrace our emotional body's wisdom with this gentle yet effective art witch practice. So I begin all creative practice by lighting a candle. And I light this candle in honor of the great creator, the creative spirit, that energy that's within and without us. And I kind of call that creative genius in to be with me. And then over here, this whole room is an altar, but here is currently where it's at the moment. And this is my working candle for the season of Samhain that we find ourselves in down here in the land of Oz. And so I've lit that candle. And this is a candle that I'll light when I'm tapping into the witchcrafting that I'm wanting to work on. And I've got other candles for other different purposes, but for today, for processing emotions through magical art practices, we'll work with those two candles. For this process, you are going to need a jar of water. I've added tourmaline for its grounding properties, and your favourite set of oil pastels. I've chosen this brand because they're richly pigmented and water soluble. I have no idea what is going to come. The only thing that matters is that I'm leaning into my emotions at this stage. I played an angry music soundtrack to help me tap in. Music is a great emotional trigger for me. I started with scribbly, sharp, angular lines, which felt good. It's not about making a pretty picture, it's just about tuning into what does anger feel like? What is this anger asking of me? How can I express this emotion on the page? Using two hands helps me let go of the mind and tap in more into the feeling. I work fast and scribbly, I get angular. I start using my voice, roaring, making animal sounds. It all gets a bit frantic. And the more I lean in, the more I feel the anger. I release tension through my hands, and the water application ignites the oil pastel so I can smear it through the paper. The paper starts to crumple. That feels really good. So I just trust the feeling. I keep going with the flow. And as the paper keeps wanting to crumple, I go with it and screw it up tight. I go with the flow in each moment. I trust the intuitive impulse, not the second voice that wants to edit or make sense or a pretty picture, just the part that wants to flow. The non-dominant hand is really good to use because it gets us straight out of the analytical mind. It helps us drop into that emotional space, intuitive space. I keep using my voice at this stage, those nonsense sounds. The page suddenly rips. And I go with it, and it feels so good to just tear it all up. I yell and tear and scrunch and rip. The anger finally gets to be felt. And leaned into in a safe space. I then take my trusty cauldron and decide to shove it all in there, squashing it in and roaring into the cauldron as I go. Now we're going to set that fucker on fire. So, I now have this really awesome anger ash that I can use in future magical workings. A possibility when the fire is cranking that I didn't film because I kind of actually got in the moment of wanting to do some actual processing with the fire rather than just filming. And what it is that you take the flame into your energy centers. And because this wasn't a flame to burn the anger to distance myself from it, it was a process of like phoenix integration. It was really nice to draw that fire into my energy centers and just wash that smoke through me. And so smoldery and fabulous and powerful. So and I have a really awesome art witch manicure going on. Bonus! Alright, I'm gonna get cleaned up and sit back down and finish this one off. Okay, so that's all from me for today. I hope this video is interesting for you and maybe encourages you to lean in to your emotions and explore them, or maybe at least just to consider the emotional body's intelligence. and not squash it all down or in, or think that some parts are bad and some parts are good. Everything's wonderful and everything is magic.